Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We are coming to you virtually from Seattle, the PNW, and again today, the Great White North, eh? Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this is the podcast for you. This is where street smarts and book smarts, they collide. Hello again, I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today is Phil Simchich. Our guest, we're very excited to have John Hine. John is the CEO of Shoemaker Manufacturing in beautiful Cle Elum, Washington. And I mean, that's just on the other side of the Cascades. A third generation family business. Shoemaker Manufacturing Company has produced high quality air distribution products for the HVAC industry. They've done work and have products in many high profile places across the United States, including sports stadiums, Las Vegas hotels, and high-end retailers. You've probably all walked around, didn't even realize it. And they have their things there. So John, welcome. We can't wait to talk to you in just a few minutes. Listen, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. We are ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, including the mothership in Atlanta, Boston, Boca Raton. We're now in Columbus and Knoxville, a lot of different places, about a dozen across the United States. Now, before we bring on John to learn more about him and Shoemaker Manufacturing, hello, Phil, coming from Regina, Saskatchewan. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, Dan. Great to be here.
Hey, listen, I started doing a little bit of prep work on John. And as I mentioned, they are a third generation family run business. And it got me thinking, which I'm sure you're surprised at that it got me thinking. As a grandfather of a soon to be 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, I have all of a sudden realized they're like third generation to me. I'm the first in line on all of that. And I realized that perhaps early on in their lives, my best quality as that first generation is watching cartoons with them. We are really, really experts at watching cartoons. In fact, we just watched, I don't know if you watched the Paw Patrol, Phil, but one day you might, but we just watched the Paw Patrol movie. And so Pops is really good at cartoons. Do you have any memories of, I know you're still waiting for grandkids at some point, but what's your third generation favorite story?
Yeah, that brings back a lot of great memories of grandparents. And my daughters have been very fortunate to have grandparents living in the same city. So right from when they were little and babysitting advantages to being in high school and then stopping over at Granny and Grandpa's for tea and cookies and snacks as high schoolers. So grandparents have a very important role in the kids' development, much more than they probably see. And I grew up Ukrainian family, so I was lucky I had 2 babas in town. And so the cooking was always fantastic. And whenever you showed up, the hungrier you were, the better, because after 3 bowls of homemade noodles, if you couldn't handle bowl number 4, it's like, what's the matter? You sick? You don't like my cooking? And so we learned how to pace ourselves to eat 5 bowls of noodles and then be prepared to go lie on the floor for a while. And then the cinnamon buns would come out. So
the cinnamon buns.
Stretched stomach. Oh yeah, it was a high carb day, so it was really good for sports and training.
Well, the Ukrainians, just by fact of where they are, you've got to have those high carb. It gets cold up there. Probably gets cold in Regina too.
Well, yeah, that's why we like our potatoes any time of year.
Well, John, enough of the nonsense between Phil and myself. First of all, welcome, and you're a third family generation. We were speaking just a little bit before the show about, your grandfather and how the whole business started. First of all, welcome. And please share with everybody a little bit about the history of Shoemaker Manufacturing. And maybe alongside with that, your earliest recollections of being involved in the business?
Absolutely. Dan, Phil, thank you very much for having me. So using a little bit of a Paw Patrol reference, a little rubble on the double, in 1993, I was given a broom. And that was my first adventure into shoemakers, was sweeping out our warehouse. But it really started back in 1954 when my grandfather Rudy went to work for Bill Shoemaker. The company had moved from Seattle, where it started in 1947, to Roslyn, Washington. And my grandfather was a coal miner. He quickly stepped out of the mines to become a foreman for Shoemaker Manufacturing Company. And in 1957, unfortunately, the company went bankrupt. And at that time, my grandmother and grandfather bought the debt from the bank. And since then, it has been a family business. But fast forward to, like you said, 1993, that was that's when I started with the company. I was quickly, after 1993, I was promoted to box assembler for the following summer. And, fortunately, I was given the opportunity to work throughout the summers and work right next to all of the coworkers. At the time when I was 15, 16, 17, I didn't know that it was a great opportunity to really earn the respect of everybody around me. But I quickly found out that that's what I was doing. As I was doing many jobs, it became automated.
Hey, Phil, before you ask your question, it dawned on me as soon as John said Roslyn, which is nearby Cle Elum. I mean, your neighbors. For anybody who ever watched Twin Peaks, Roslyn, Cle Elum, that's where Twin Peaks was set, wasn't it?
Twin Peaks, Northern Exposure. We definitely have some shows. Yes, correct. Both of them.
Go ahead, Phil. Sorry, I just had to throw that in because people may remember those shows.
You mentioned the previous owner moved from Seattle to Roslyn, and now we're seeing employees vacating large cities and moving to smaller centers as well, just for life balance and decreasing commute and quality of life. And so you're well established in Cle Elum. What advice would you have for a business owner who's considering moving their business out of an expensive big city into a smaller urban population where their employees want to go anyways?
I think we are having the opportunity to kind of see what happens on the result of that. And right away, you do get the influx of population, which gives you an opportunity to add new skill sets that maybe before you either had to outsource or work back on a contract basis. I think the biggest thing, if you were to move your company, and we've definitely looked at expanding outside of Cle Elum, is finding a way to make it a cultural fit, and not only in the new location, but also with the existing location and existing employees as well too. And I don't know if that's something that is can just be quickly found on paper, or if that's something that's more dynamic. But I've been told by many people that small towns definitely are a little bit slower, a little bit more intentional, maybe a little bit easier to hang on to people for a longer period of time. So there's pros and cons definitely on both sides.
Yeah,
so,
you've definitely benefited
go ahead, Phil.
From being able to, as you say, as the executives leave the big city to really talent up in some of those key positions. Can you just give us an example or two there?
Yeah, absolutely. We have multiple examples of that. We've been fortunate enough to have many people that have had a chance to really gain a skill set and really advance up the ladder in the big city, and then found that they wanted to have a place to either retire or move their family to. So we have our director of IT came to us 15 years ago from one of the big 5 accounting firms. We have had the CEO of Dairygold be able to work with us, and so we've been fortunate to have people gain a amazing amount of skill sets in the city. But then they were ready to slow down and really come over and not just help us, continue to grow the organization, but add a skill set to the organization that we haven't had before, whether it's through experience shares, whether it's through acquisitions, whether it's through expanding product lines, people that have been there, done that, which has been a great asset to add to our team.
Well, John, your answer just gave me a different question that I'm going to come back to the other one later, but it made me think a little bit about something you said in our pregame, so to speak, that you grew up in Cle Elum. Then at that time, you couldn't wait to get out. and then you couldn't wait to go back. So there's something to that small town in you as well, because I grew up in a small town. I never moved back to it, but I live in another small town that was very similar. Talk a little bit about that for you. Working in the family business, then probably going off to college and getting out of the city, but then going back, getting back into it. Can you talk a little bit about your journey there?
Absolutely. We were really fortunate, my sisters and I, to never be pushed to work in the family business. Is a choice if we wanted to. And so I took that choice because I enjoyed always working with my hands, and I enjoyed always learning. So Shoemakers was the easy fit for me. But when 18 years of age hit, I was ready to get out and find, to go to college and find out, more of a big city. But what you don't realize at 18 is some of the benefits of having not only just a small town, but a small town that is located so geographically close to all of the amenities that you want. And we're really fortunate that Cle Elum has that. And I think just 4 years away going to college, you realize right away that, growing up, I thought everybody had pine trees and four seasons and lakes and snow in your backyard. And you quickly realize that isn't the case. And so it was a great opportunity to go away. But like I said, too, it was also a great opportunity to learn a skill set outside of Shoemaker. One of the cons a little bit of a family business at times is maybe that's all you know. So when I went away to college, one of my first goals was to get another job, to have another boss, and understand what the other side of being an employee was like. And it was a good experience, and it probably made me appreciate the opportunity of Shoemakers even more.
Yeah, and you're in a family business now. So co-owners are also family, also executives, correct? And so how do you manage that dynamic? Because you've already talked about a couple family business best practices of A, getting an education, and B, getting work experience outside the family business. So you've checked those two critical boxes. And now how do you manage the ongoing family dynamics?
No, absolutely. And it's definitely a dynamic that you have to be aware of, because holiday dinners aren't just holiday dinners when you're the rest of the executives of the company are sitting next to you. Another problem with the small town as well, too, is you generally live fairly close by to the other executives in the company. I think what we've all done, and it was definitely, I would say, led by my grandfather, Rudy, and my dad, from an example perspective, is everybody in an organization from top to bottom is important. There's no one person that is more important than anybody else. I know it was my dad always said, whether you were taking the garbage out or whether you were signing the checks, every job was critical. And we've always really had the mindset. My sister Claire, who is our CFO, and has shared that same mindset and that humble gratitude that I do at the same point, because we've realized right away, and we haven't been perfect, that you don't get to shut off family business. You are going to be spending time with family that you work with, but you do need to take that time necessary away from everybody to be able to recharge, but to be able to have the confidence to have that vulnerable conversation when you need to, and not be judged by emotions that can happen really quick with a family business. So I'm super fortunate that all of us have bought into that.
Yeah, and so you mentioned being able to get away and recharge, and I know you're a member of peer groups and your business offers you travel. So what do you do personally to recharge and stay on top of your game?
Well, there's a couple things that I try to do, and I'd love to say I was great at them, but I think it's always a process. I was involved with 5 years with the EO Group of Seattle. And in the last year, I've joined YPO Network of Seattle, which is the Young Presidents Association. And what I really love about that is a group of people, and it's comprised of either family businesses, hired guns, or entrepreneurs that have, that are currently running an organization. And the shared experiences that they provide have just been really essential, because it really helps the highs level out, and the lows, maybe we realize right away your lows aren't as bad as other people. That's been beneficial. I also have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and that really puts everything into perspective, because no matter what you have going on, when I get home at the end of my 8-minute commute, I'm dad. And I quickly go from making all of the executive decisions to the lowest person on the totem pole, which I love. But I get to be dad. And that is something that helps kind of not only recharge the batteries, but really put perspective on everything that can happen great in a day, and then everything that can happen in a day that can be difficult as well.
You know, and I want to get this question in before our break, because what we haven't really talked a lot about what it is you do, what it is you manufacture, and I want to get that in before we get to break. So you're not manufacturing shoes. Shoemaker Manufacturing is not that. Tell everybody a little bit about what it is that you do manufacture.
No, and it's always a little disappointment when I tell people right away we don't make shoes. But what we do is we manufacture comfort, because we provide the products that allow your home, your office, or wherever people are sitting at right now to be conditioned through either heat or air conditioning. So the products that you would find in your floor or your ceiling, or that would have a filter behind them, Shoemaker's manufactures those. And there's actually a science behind it, that you want to make sure that you are distributing air in a way that is extremely quiet, but extremely effective as well too. The interesting part about what we do, and we're part of an entire system, there's only two things in a system that you see, and it's your thermostat that controls this temperature, and then the register that we manufacture that distributes that air throughout the room.
Wow. So I appreciate that. Usually we dive in, but there's so much. By the way, you have a great website. I wanted you to know that. People go to the website, because you'll also see a video of John taking you for a virtual tour through there. So it's a lot of fun. But we have to head to break now. We got to pay the bills, so to speak. So we're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with our guest, John Hein, for the Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to see if, speaking of hot and cold, I guess, heating and cooling, we're going to think what John thinks of lean manufacturing. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Would you like to grow your business, increase revenues, and raise profits? Would more financing from your banker help you grow? Who is guiding your succession plan? Would you like more control over your business so you sleep better at night? SME Business Wealth Builder works with business leaders and owners like you to help them grow their business and build their business wealth. For more information and to check out free resources, go to smewealthbuilder.com.
All right, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Phil Simchich, and our guest today is John Hein of Shoemaker Manufacturing for our next segment, Hot or Not.
So John, Hot or Not is where we pepper you with questions about business, about life, about a whole bunch of different things. And I'm going to change it for you. This is not hot or not. It's going to be hot or cold. We're going to see if this is hot or cold. You're going to tell us why or why not. And by the way, John, at the end, unfortunately, you win absolutely nothing. So hot or not, lean manufacturing.
Hotter than ever, especially with the supply chain issues going on right now, and especially with the labor issues right now. Lean is, in my opinion, the only way you're going to want to start a manufacturing company. Or if you have one, you're going to want to implement lean principles from not only in the manufacturing, but from top to bottom. We do it in our sales channel. We do it in our inside customer service channel. It is extremely critical.
So Phil, can I ask a really quick follow up to that, because it's not a hot or not. You know, you brought up supply chain, and maybe Phil was going to talk about this, so I apologize if I'm stealing your thunder. But I recently took 2 months for me to get a brand new golf club because the shaft was so back ordered, just from a supply chain. Everybody I talk to is supply chain has impacted everybody. How has supply chain challenges from COVID impacted your business?
Well, I mean, we've had huge impacts, but just to put it in context, all of our competition have had the exact same impact. So because we're in Cle Elum, or because we're manufacturing with sheet metal, it's really been no different. So we produce about 7 truckloads of products a day. We'll produce over 4 million products here in 2021 to sell to our wholesale distribution customers. I think the biggest impact really has been, it's really been the focus on making sure from a lean perspective that we know what we actually have, so we can execute a daily plan. That's what's been so great about the lean principles is once you know what you have the ability to put an execution plan in place. We've seen our inventories dwindle from about 2 million pounds of inventory on the floor at the beginning of the year to about 600,000 pounds of inventory on the floor currently right now. But we do have fairly good forecasts. And the other thing that I've got to thank our vendors, because a lot of our vendors that we've had decade relationships with. And so that communication and that trust has really allowed us to know, what we were going to be able to have and when.
So that does lead into my question about stockpiling inventory as a security blanket and for stability and help you sleep at night, hot or cold.
Shoemakers has definitely looked at it in a hot perspective. I think one of the fears of stockpiling inventory right now, especially as inventory costs have just increased to levels we've never seen, whether that's, from lumber and steel and cardboards and plastics and pallets. There's always the fear of, well, what happens if the bottom falls out and you're stuck with an inventory that now all of a sudden has been devalued overnight. I think what would be worse is being stuck without inventory so you can't service your customers at all. And we've really taken that mindset. We always look at kind of that long play rather than that short play.
So hot or not, John, the manufacturing industry in the state of Washington, just with all that's been going on and what we've just talked about, is the manufacturing industry hot or cold?
So I guess from John Hines' perspective, I would say it's cold. And the reason why is for manufacturing to be successful, and we've proven in Washington that it can be, you need collective partnerships between all levels. And it has to be something that there's buy-in from all levels, and that starts at the state level and the county and the city level. But I think that one of the reasons why manufacturing is difficult is there's very few raw materials that are actually produced in Washington. So a lot of them are going to be brought in, and then a lot of them have to be brought back out. I think that, and the way the tax structure is set, the way minimum wage is set, I think that, it is making it difficult to manufacture. What we do is part of it's a commoditized product. So it's it's a product that there's going to be a cost focus. I'm sure there's other industries that would think otherwise, but the way we look at it, I would say it's more cold.
So in terms of manufacturing, what about technology, automation, AI? Are those hot or cold?
Those are hot. And I think we have some of the most brilliant minds in the Northwest out of anywhere around the United States. And I think also, Phil, like you just mentioned, one way you combat all the things that I just said is through technology. It's through robotics. It's through artificial intelligence. And I think that's really important. And that's something that we're constantly looking at, is knowing, how do we evolve in a way to not only be better for our customers, but also be here 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. We have to find ways to do things more cost effective and more efficient all the time.
John, to that end, if you're talking about technology, what about e-commerce? Because I know you do both residential and commercial applications. How do you utilize e-commerce?
Well, so I have to drive my pickup to work because my wife utilizes e-commerce, and I'm taking boxes home every night. So, I think that, being in a small town, we absolutely loved e-commerce at first. But looking back at what we do as a business, I think e-commerce is a way for consumers to be able to research anything that they want, understand anything they want, and then purchase anything they want, including our products. I think that we have the ability here through what we manufacture to understand that market better, and not only sell the products we're making right now on e-commerce, which we're getting ready to launch in Q4, but find products that consumers really want. We've always sold through wholesale distribution, so we've been steps away from the actual, the end user. And e-commerce allows manufacturers to be, connected right away to the end user and find out right away what people need and want to be successful.
So I want to change gears a little bit. COVID's been around for 18 months. Some businesses have thrived, some have survived, and some haven't. And I just want to ask you your opinion on the difference, because most entrepreneurs that I've known are always focused on the income statement and cranking up sales. So how important is a focus on the balance sheet? Is that hot or not?
Well, I think it has to be hot, especially right now, looking at so many unknowns, because not only with the supply chain problem, but we've run into this a little bit as well too. You can automatically, because of your competition faltering, you can be inundated with with top line revenue opportunities right away. But you have to make sure it works from a bottom line perspective as well too. So I think it's cautious. Anytime there's major change, you have to make sure you have multiple people. And I'm blessed with an amazing team that can look at it from all different perspectives.
You know, it's interesting. You live in a small town, and I know that small towns can be very community oriented. I'm not even going to make this a hot or cold because I know I'm sure that the answer is, but talk about the importance of community and giving back to the community you're in, and maybe to the area or region you're in. How actively involved are you, maybe personally and as a company, in giving back to the community?
Well, it's one of the biggest things that we do. And in 1992, we actually started our first foundation. So we operate the Shoemaker Foundation, and it is focused on three core pillars. It's community, it is kids, and it is education. And if it fits that bucket, it is not only something that we're going to want to financially participate in, but it's going to something that we're going to be actively involved in. We've done everything from summer lunch program in the summertime to right now. Actually, my sister is the director of the recreation center that we are looking at building in the community. We do usually about $25,000 worth of college scholarships per year to local people. And that's not just to go to a four-year school. We look at two-year degrees, trade schools. We think it's really important if children want an opportunity to be successful, we always do, how can we help? And the fun thing is we kind of put on that logistics perspective as well too. And a quick story about the summer lunch program. The first week we really had a problem. We were serving lunches in two parks and we couldn't get kids there. So right away we go into the problem solving. We called the school, we got buses, and we went around, we were picking kids up and bringing them to the park. So that's just kind of how we operate here, and we get excited to do that. But if without a strong community, you can't have a strong business. And we're really fortunate to have an amazingly strong community here in not only Cle Elum, but Cle Elum, Roslyn, Ronald, and all of the small towns in between.
And you talked a lot about like that giving and your family business values really extended through, or the family values extended through the family business. So I think that definitely gives you a distinct advantage over much larger competitors, because you mentioned earlier whether cultural fit was important or not, but I think your values are just so strong in the community that it's easy for people to identify what they are and then to self-select in. So again, not really a hot or cold question, but how does a younger company or a newer company really set its values and turn them into actions?
So I mean, I think it's one of the things everybody wants is they want to have values printed on a wall when you walk in. But more importantly to us, it was not the values you have written on the wall, but how you conduct yourself. How do you actually carry yourself? Because really how you lead it really defines what values you have. And I think that we're fortunate, and I'm, like I mentioned earlier, I'm blessed with a team. And we talk about integrity and respect and dedication, but we live that. We live those examples. And I think it's really important that we stop to make sure that we are as an organization, not just as from 7 to 4:30 when we're manufacturing, but as an organization, that we are making decisions based off of those core values. And that's really important to us, whether it's, in the wintertime, if our snow plow has extra hours to go, plow people out, or in the summertime when there's, all of a sudden kids in need because, there's fires in our community. We want to make sure that we're always, acting in a way that is who we are.
And I got to believe I'm so fascinated by what you're talking about. Again, in a town where, I don't know how many employees do you have, John?
125.
100. That you've probably, other than maybe the school district, one of the largest employers in Cle Elum around. I've got to believe that the closeness of your employees to that, your ears are always open to hearing about where something's in need. I got to believe that not only your executive team, but your employees play a prolific role in that.
Yeah, no, all of our employees from top to bottom play a huge role in that. And when we bring new employees on, we want them to understand that culture right away. I mean, I think right away, a lot of employees think they're going to come on and learn, what their job and their job description, but they're probably surprised right away with the questions they get of like, hey, tell me about your family. Are you having trouble finding a place to live? Do you have any questions about the community? What are your thoughts on the schools? And we want people not only to feel comfortable in the community, but also feel like they've put a stake in the ground, whether they're moving here or that they find ways to be more actively involved in the community as well too, because it can't be done just by an executive staff or Claire and myself. It's really that it's from top to bottom.
Okay, well, Phil, I hate to do this, but I can't believe how fast this is going. John, we're gonna have to take another short break to hear from our sponsors. But when we come back with John Hine for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about sibling rivalry. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors: Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, and the Kitsap Sun newspaper. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm co-host Phil Simchich. Our guest today is John Hine. For our next segment, Plead the Fifth.
Well, John, we're literally going to turn up the heat now. But this is a lot of fun, Phil. I like having somebody who helps out the HVAC community. We're going to turn up the heat here a little bit with our Plead the Fifth. We're going to ask you some maybe harder questions about business life, maybe make you think a little bit or squirm a little bit. And you can plead the fifth once, but only once. After that we're really going to turn up the heat. And again, at the end, you win absolutely nothing. So John, your sister Claire, you said, is the CFO, correct?
Correct.
So if we had Claire sitting here and she had some truth serum in her, or maybe she doesn't even need it, and we said, Claire, what's the one thing that John could improve upon? What should he start doing? What should he stop doing? What would Claire say?
Well, your segment is probably not long enough, but I think what she would initially say is it's always the greatest strength, greatest weakness. And at times my passion is probably not always used right place, right time. I think that my sister, being a CFO, very logical, very numbers driven, I think there's times where she would appreciate my passion, would probably go in the garbage can, and I would just stop and listen to what she's talking about in terms of how we're financially doing.
By the way, those two personalities, was there anything to that when you were kids too? Was that ever were those ever issues back even when you were growing up?
They were a little bit. It's funny. My sister's highly competitive, like I am. But the good thing is I guess I was 2 years younger than her in school. But I was, and probably, thank goodness we weren't brothers or sisters together, because we would have really got after each other's throats. But there were definitely times where we've always got along really well. But we know when we've crossed the line with each other, and we quickly will spend a few minutes apart.
How do you depressurize these intense situations? And this is more advice for anybody and everybody in a family business.
Well, I would love to say I always take this, but one thing that I remember my dad telling me in 2001 when I came back to work full time, and I was kind of thrown in a little bit of a fire because of some health situations and somebody leaving. I was 21 years old, and I was immediately the director of operations. My dad told me, if you think something's a really good idea, sleep on it and see if it's a really good idea the next morning. And I didn't quite understand what he was saying, but what it meant is you're going to get blindsided with something. And if you think that you have the answer and it has even a little bit of controversy behind it, take a night and sleep on it. And I understand that better now. And I definitely do that a lot better now. I'm not perfect, but it's amazing just taking the emotion out of a thought and adding a little bit more logic. Sometimes you come to the exact same decision, but sometimes you realize that night's sleep was much better.
What's the toughest thing? And I guess this is a plead the fifth. What's the toughest thing about being in charge of a third family generation? I don't know if your grandfather and father are still living, but what's the toughest challenge of knowing there were people before you who are running it and might be looking at what you're doing now and kind of not looking over your shoulder, but you've got those shadows behind you. What's the toughest part?
You know, I was lucky. I think on week one, I had an employee tell me, the first generation starts the business, the second generation grows it, and the third generation screws it up. And I think that was, an opportunity, a little bit of a challenge. I think one of the hardest points is when you're running that family business is making decisions based off of what would be best for the next generation, best for the family, and at the same time, best for the business. And I think sometimes, and family business, there's nothing wrong with it, but you do make decisions kind of based off of lifestyle, the town that you work in, where your kids go to school, what's best long term for the business, but more from the lifestyle. And you get big enough to where you have to start making decisions in what's really best for the business, what is best for the health of the business. And the other thing too is you realize is that nobody else is going to have the same emotion as you are. They're not going to be as emotionally as vested as you are. They're going to love their job just as much. They're going to work just as hard, but they're not as emotionally as invested in the business because it's not in their blood as you are. And you have to understand that and be okay with that.
So you articulated the stewardship function of running a family business for the benefit of the next generation. You also mentioned that the business needs to be properly managed to get there, right? So how do you prioritize the business in the short term so that it's there for the family in the long term?
I think the one thing you have to do, and this might sound a little bit odd, is you need to make sure you're the dumbest person around the table. And I think what I mean by that is you have to make sure that you've surrounded yourself with not yes men and not people that want to take orders and find out what to do, but are literally the smartest and brightest and best collaborative people that you can find. And they can help you make what's the right decisions are for the organization, and they can help push the organization forward. A family business doesn't get pushed forward by the generations or the owners. It gets pushed forward collectively by everybody.
So, John, I've got to get this question in because we've been asking it of everybody this year. We're going to probably compile it somehow and see what everybody said. We've had some fun answers. So I'm pulling you out. You're no longer going to be in charge of Shoemaker Manufacturing, but you got to start a new business. And the new business is going to be based on a hobby. What's the hobby and what's the new business?
What's the hobby and what's the new business? I have, over the last 4 years, become extremely passionate about gardening and absolutely love it. Have gone from being horrible to, I would say, moderately successful. And it would definitely have something to do with around growing and, food and farming. We have our own garden, and it's probably because it's completely different from what I do on a daily basis. But it's probably my biggest hobby right now. And it's a family hobby. My wife, helped us get into this, was her ideas, and my kids love doing it. Our goats love to come in and mow the garden down in the fall. So it's been great.
In terms of gardening, you're growing slowly and nurturing. How do you apply that to business and helping your people develop, nurture, and grow?
It's funny. I learned with the garden right away, the most critical time with the garden is before it even grows. The most critical time is the seed in the ground, the depth of the seed, the water on the seed. And I think the translation of that is the initial time that you see before you would see revenue, before you would see return on investment, before you'd actually be able to reap the rewards of your time is going to be the most important time you spend. So you have to be patient, but you have to be deliberate, and you have to have a plan. It's that initial, planting of that seed and taking care of it. You can't do it wrong. And believe me, I've learned because I've done it wrong. And by the end of the summer, all you have is a garden full of weeds.
So, John, I've got one last question before we send it to Phil to close, because I have to believe that everything at Shoemaker Manufacturing has just stopped. Everybody is around the Facebook live stream right now, watching you. There's nothing, there's no lean manufacturing going on right now. And as they're watching, and I say, plead the fifth, what is one thing that people would be shocked to know about you, that they have no idea, even though you grew up in Cle Elum and people may have known you since the beginning? What's one thing people would be shocked to learn about you?
You know, the most shock thing is, and maybe not as much anymore after they've seen me become a dad, but there's a lot of raw emotion behind everything that I do. I mean, it probably comes off as care, compassion, frustration, but there's a lot of raw emotion behind all the things that I do. And I think when I love something and I love a community and I love my job, I mean, that comes with a lot of emotion. I'm fortunate I don't need an alarm to wake up in the morning. But I also know that raw emotion at times is really difficult for some people to understand and process. As well too, but I think it just shows, I'm not here, wanting to give people, a paycheck or want to give people a job. It's a career, it's a growth, it's a chance to hopefully experience some of the love that I have for the community and the business that can rub off on everybody else.
John, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you and learn more about Shoemaker, how can they get more information?
Well, the best place is, you mentioned earlier, Dan, is our team has put together, our internal team, an amazing website. We have all of our business information there. I'm not a big social media person, but I do have a LinkedIn profile, and I would love to have new connections on LinkedIn, regardless if they're in the industry or not. I am an active learner. I always love to learn about what other people do, what other people are experiencing, both good and bad. So please contact me on LinkedIn, contact our company on our website. And I would love to, if anybody has any HVAC needs for, from an aesthetic perspective to a functional perspective, the best way that we develop product is feedback from anybody. So we'd always appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks for that, John. You're like the opposite of Dyson. So where they suck, you actually contribute and blow air into to make the environment healthier. So I think you're just following in Dyson's footpath, just the opposite direction. So awesome. Make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts, such as iHeart, Apple, Google, and Spotify. Please follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, John, thanks for being here. I'm going to make it a point to make it back to Cle Elum, and we'll have lunch at Mama Valone's. All right. I think I got that name right, correct?
You did, and I'm going to hold you to it, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll do that. Phil, I think I'm actually going to see you live in person again for the first time in a couple of years, in a couple of weeks up at Whistler. I'm looking forward to looking you face to face, not through a little box. So that'll be great. Everybody else, as Phil said, like our Facebook page, because we're going to be live streaming again next Wednesday, September the 22nd. I can't believe we're almost 3/4 of the way through September, but September the 22nd at noon, our guest will be Bria Starmer with Lions plus Tigers. There's got to be an oh my in there somewhere, I'm wondering, but Lions plus Tigers. Michelle Baumberger will be my co-host that day. So we've had a lot of fun day today with John and Phil, but we got more coming. In the meantime, before we see you again, be safe, be well, be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.